Why do you think it is this session that it seems like there's a lot of housing bills and that both the House and the Senate and the Lieutenant Governor, probably the Governor, are all very much focused on housing affordability? Why do you think that is the case this session?
Well, I think it's easy to see across the state of Texas with our tremendous growth that we lack inventory, whether it be through multifamily or single family. We just lack the inventory there to make sure that everybody has an affordable house, and that's causing prices to go up. And so we're all looking for different mechanisms that we can do at a state level to help lessen that burden, to help lower costs. And really what that ends up is what you start looking at is what government restrictions, what government imposed fees are contributing to that, and what can we kind of eliminate or, as one of my bills does, puts a moratorium on why we try and let this, what is, for lack of a better term, an housing affordability crisis play out and try and get that corrected.
Howdy, you're watching the Think Brazos Podcast. We host conversations with locals, politicians, and policy experts to help families thrive in Brazos County, Texas. So when you're thinking about how to make your community better, just remember, think local, think Brazos.
This is the Think Brazos Podcast, and today we are joined by Representative Paul Dyson of House District 14 of the state of Texas. Mr. Dyson, Representative, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
So with the, we were just joking offline that there may be a little bit of technical difficulties because we've got the tournament going on. So hopefully all the viewers will be able to see this. But we wanted to talk today, first of all, just about how the session is going for you, being a freshman representative. How are things going generally, and how is it going with your family, first off?
Well, and all great questions. So I'll start out with the family because that's first and most important. It's going well with the family. It took a little adjustment when we first started out, kind of hearing about this whole process and coming into it. We thought you wouldn't be down here as much at the beginning as I was. And really, I've been down here 4 to 5 days a week since opening day. Kind of getting to know people, working with people, working on bills, talking with different groups, including constituents that were coming to visit. And so it took a lot more time out of Brazos County than what I thought it was going to originally. I thought not until about mid-March or so would I be down here just kind of living what I almost consider full-time. But I usually try and head home still on late Thursday night, sometimes midday Friday, try and do some in-district meetings on Friday, have a couple of things. Tomorrow we have Brad Smith's retirement over for College Station PD that I'm coming in for, so I'm looking forward to that. But we're making it work, and I can only make it work because of Terry. We have 2 middle schoolers, and she is getting them everywhere they need to go. They're actively involved in a bunch of different things. So without her, there's no way we'd be able to make this work.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. I can't even imagine it, but yeah, kudos to you and your family for putting up with that. And so generally with the House of Representatives and the work this legislative session, what would you kind of summarize it as so far? How are things going?
I think it's been successful so far. And the reason why I say that is when we came into this, I think a lot of people thought this was going to be a tough slogging session. Not much was going to get done. I really feel like what I affectionately refer to as the big three. So the speaker, lieutenant governor, and governor are working together. They have priorities similarly outlined, and we're kind of working towards that. Now, each chamber works differently, right? The Senate, a lot of people say, moves very quickly. They're able to get things out. They only have 31 members, and they agree, it looks like, almost on everything. But we have 150 House members. And, just think about trying to wrangle 150 different personalities, trying to get them all together. And that's what you're doing. And that's how you work your bills, too, to try and get everyone on the same page and hope that you can effectuate some policy that's going to help your constituents out and also help the state of Texas.
Okay, great. So what are you most excited about as far as legislation is concerned? Are you, I've heard some things about some committees that you are serving on. What are a couple of bills that you're really excited about?
So one of the bills I'm most excited about related to my committee, it's not my bill, was actually Chairman Leach's bill going through JCJ, which is Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence. But one of the bills, we just voted it out of committee yesterday. We call it Trey's Law. And what that did is it went and voided out parts of NDA settlement agreements that told sexual abuse kind of survivors, what we call victors, not victims, but the victors at the end, that they are allowed to disclose kind of the facts surrounding it and to make sure that they can protect other people from those type of predators. We went through that. It was a very emotional testimony yesterday, but it was great testimony. It really allowed us to see how those NDAs can hurt just society in general. And that's why it was a policy decision. And, Texas, we reaffirmed that it's Texas policy coming out of committee that you can't hide those facts from the public.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And, this being kind of a housing focused podcast, I wanted to ask you first, just generally, why do you think it is this session that it seems like there's a lot of housing bills and that both the House and the Senate and the Lieutenant Governor, probably the governor, are all very much focused on housing affordability? Why do you think that is the case this session?
Well, I think it's easy to see across the state of Texas with our tremendous growth that we lack inventory, whether it be through multifamily or single family. We just lack the inventory there to make sure that everybody has an affordable house, and that's causing prices to go up. And so we're all looking for different mechanisms that we can do at a state level to help lessen that burden, to help lower costs. And really what that ends up is what you start looking at is what government restrictions, what government imposed fees are contributing to that, and what can we kind of eliminate or, as one of my bills does, puts a moratorium on why we try and let this, what is, for lack of a better term, an housing affordability crisis play out and try and get that corrected.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about this moratorium. I think right at the very end of when you can file a bill in the House, I believe you submitted a bill or filed a bill, House Bill 5489. Can we go into that a little bit more and how you think that might help take a little bit of bite out of this problem of unaffordable housing?
Sure. And I think it's just one of the tools in the government's toolbox to help with this. But it was something really we've heard about impact fees a lot in Brian conversation. You and I talked about them a little bit on the campaign trail and how it can affect habitat and how it can affect some of the affordable housing just across the state. So it was something that I always kind of had it focused on and had been looking at. But it wasn't until really I started talking with Bob Yancey recently, city councilman over in College Station. And we started talking about different issues and trying to understand what he thought could help with the affordability and inventory issues that we had. And so I started looking at it. What could we do? And there was a question on when it came to impact fees. Could we completely eliminate them? We could. Could we restrict them in some way? We could. And impact fees, most people don't realize, was created by the state to allow cities. They didn't have the inherent right just to charge impact fees. We created that in statute. And so it was something when I started looking at Chapter 395, which governs impact fees. So look, let's see what could we do to test it. Not necessarily make permanent changes to anything. Sometimes I think the government's almost too quick to react to that. And you make a permanent change thinking you've made a change for the better. And we see ripple effects that are negative from it that we maybe didn't anticipate. So you got to go correct it. But the idea behind a moratorium and kind of having a 4-year pause is we will be back in session in 2 years. We can take a look at this and see, did we really affect housing prices? Did we help incentivize more development to increase inventory to lower prices? Did builders lower the prices because there's no longer this government fees that they're having to pay, these impact fees up front, which we all know just gets passed on to the home buyer and home purchaser. And so I think that was my thinking behind a moratorium, as gives us a chance to look and study to see if this is something we would want to continue. And if it's something that's not working, just as easy as the moratorium went in there, the moratorium could be removed if we decide that it's not something that's actually affecting prices, and if it has some type of adverse effect that we didn't anticipate. So, and that's why I think it's a strategic tool to be used and something that I hope gets some focus here in the House. Like I said, it's working with all the tools that we have available to us to try and help with this crisis.
Yeah, so I guess, breaking it down for our viewers, in Bryan and College Station and Brazos County, what are you hoping, this bill could accomplish, in real terms for the cities? Do you have any sort of estimates on maybe it'll make X number more new home starts or anything like that?
I don't have any numbers yet.
Okay,
It's something that I would love to get and work with kind of the Builder Association and also the
sure.
cities on. My understanding is that Brian doesn't impose impact fees at this time,
Okay,
and I'm not sure they're planning to, so I don't know if it would have an effect there.
right.
And College Station, if I think there's an exception in the moratorium to if you've pledged your impact fees to bonds.
Mhm.
Um, in other words, it's part of your financing in a particular comprehensive plan that you put forward, and that it's going directly to that infrastructure. Then that's accepted out of this moratorium.
I
You're
see.
allowed to keep collecting because that would disrupt the financial instruments, and we didn't want to just do that. So that would be the exception. So I'm not sure how that applies to College Station, but I think the bigger thing is that anyone who was thinking about starting a new development,
Uh-huh,
this would be the time to do that
I see.
because this would incentivize them to get out there and start creating more inventory while the moratorium is there because no new fees would be imposed.
Okay. So that's one of the tools that you're looking at for this session. Are there any other housing bills or things either in the Senate or the House that you're looking at? I know I saw a news release, I think this morning or yesterday, the Lieutenant Governor was talking about SB 15 as another housing bill. Are there any other bills that you're studying or looking at this time?
So SB 15 would be one of them, and I'm trying to remember what the companion one is here in the
Mm,
House. It has a companion bill over here now. So that's the one we looked at. If I remember right, is that the one that's restricting lot sizes or shrinking?
I believe it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's because we're looking at lot sizes, the kind of accessory dwelling units, the ADUs,
Great. Okay.
not restricting those. So there's a lot of different things that help to add housing capacity in different ways, and really, I mean, in some creative ways, right?
Mhm.
And stuff to be studied. So all of them will be things that we're looking at. Of course, I'm going to work with uh, our local political subdivisions, talk to the cities, talk to the county, and see how that's going to actually affect them before we kind of move forward one way or the other. Um, and also, you want to hear from Habitat. You want to hear from other
Yeah.
ones that are out there in the front lines of housing affordability,
Mhm.
of what they see. And it may not even affect Bryan College Station, but it may affect some of the larger cities. And that's the other thing to talk about is some of these bills may get bracketed to just larger cities and larger counties that would
Yes.
not even include Brazos County. And the reason for that is because that's where they're having a lot of people that are not able to find homes or find affordable homes. So
Okay. So something kind of related to the housing, actually very much related to the housing. We're hearing a lot about water and the impact of water in the state. You can't build a new subdivision without having effectively enough water to be able to serve that subdivision. Are you working on anything with other representatives with the Senate regarding water or bills to address the availability of water?
I'm not personally working on them, but there
Okay.
are several bills and kind of that I am watching.
Hmm.
The two biggest ones are going to be the kind of water infrastructure funding that
Okay.
they're doing, and Senator Perry in the Senate is carrying one, and then Chairman Cody Harris, who chairs Natural Resources, is carrying the House companion to that, and that's going to look at dedicating a certain amount of revenue into improving and also developing new water infrastructure. And so those are some big ones that I'm watching. And kind of the idea there is we all know water's running out in certain places, but there's different types of water sources available. And so the new aspect of it would be looking at how can we take advantage of some of those water sources that are out there that right now aren't necessarily freshwater sources, but we might be able to turn them into freshwater sources.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things I'd point you down to is like in Corpus Christi with the desal plant that they're putting
Mhm.
in. That's going to desal Gulf Coast water and bring it in, clean it up for them to use as fresh water. So everyone's watching that because that could open up a whole new water source because we have so much brackish water throughout
Yeah.
Texas, especially in areas that right now it's just not as well. It's not usable. It's accessible, but not usable.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I did want to ask, you hear a lot from your constituents and organizations, and especially the cities, Bryan, College Station, Brazos County. This session so far, what do you think what are some, I guess, recurring things that you're hearing from the cities that they're very interested in discussing with you? It can be positive or negative, but what are some of the themes you're seeing here?
Well, local control.
Yep.
That's always the biggest one. And I'm a big believer in that. I
Right.
think that when you start talking about something that's going to affect a city, if it's statewide, you have to have a pretty good policy reason of why it needs to apply to the entire state. Because one thing we know about Texas is it's vastly different in different regions. We're so
Right.
large, whether it be rural versus urban, just the size of some of those areas, just the terrain and the climates in the different areas, so it's not a one size fits all a lot of times. There are
Mhm.
some issues that are. I think that like the moratorium on impact fees is on housing affordability. It can apply equally across the state. But there's some other things that you have to start looking at. That includes, um, you know, regulating certain lot sizes and everything, which is, I think, one of the biggest discussions I'll probably hear. I've already heard from College Station. I haven't heard from Brian on it yet, but I'm sure that I will, because cities don't want to be told that they can't zone in certain ways.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be part of the big discussions. And
Mhm.
I know that's moving through the Senate. Also, the occupancy
Yep.
restrictions. That's another big one that we're already starting to hear about. So those are going to be things we work around, and it's kind of talking and seeing, is there a middle ground that can be made in there, and really letting the cities know, look, if this is, we kind of get an idea of the way the Senate feels because the Senate moves first on it, is moving
Mhm.
first on it. But it's, hey, this is what I'm hearing in the House, and this is how I think it's might come down in the House. Sometimes when it's going to be negative, you try and figure out, is there something that I can add in there that could be positive for you? What
Yeah.
can I work that'll help our residents? Because
Yeah.
ultimately, it's not necessarily I'm here to work for the cities, but I'm here to work for all the residents that are in the cities, which
Right.
you presume the city's working for them too. So a lot of times we're aligned on that because that's what helps our constituents.
Yeah, you mentioned the occupancy limits. It might be a little early for me to ask this question, but where do you feel like you're standing on that issue? I know that, you mentioned the Senate has some movement there on these occupancy restriction bills.
Mhm.
I don't know. It might be too early to ask you that, but I'm just curious your stance.
Hey, but you go ahead and ask it, right?
Yeah.
Because, well, and it's something that I am still studying. I'm still
Okay.
looking into. I understand both arguments. I think here's my biggest issue is that when you talk about the no more than four in College Station, for example, it has been around for a while,
Yeah.
and people have bought properties knowing that that ordinance exists and whether it's enforced or not. But then you hear the stories about enforcement and what a lot of people would say is harassment that's coming down from code enforcement. And so you hear those stories too, and you go, all right, well, how can we balance these? And I think that's the hardest part for me looking into it. Just because I know College Station's had it. I believe Brian also has it too.
I believe so.
Um, what's that, Charles?
Oh, I said I believe so, that Brian also.
Yeah. And so, and it becomes, is it really the no more than four that is upsetting people? Is it going less than no more than four? And so we need to set a top line. So it's interesting to watch those discussions develop. I'm not intimately involved in them. I'm more just watching them because it won't go through either one of my committees.
I see.
Um, it's nice to know, and it goes back to that relationship building, right? You get to know those people that are on the committees, and you kind of get them. Hey, what's the pulse of the committee? What are y'all feeling is in
Yeah.
the House? So.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to send back to your constituents before we sign off here?
Oh, just that if y'all have anything else, anytime you see bills or anything that you have questions about, or even if you see social media posts that you have questions about, saying, call our office, call the office here in Austin. It is really your office. We're here to serve you. And so don't ever be shy about it. Feel free to send in emails or call. We try and work through and get all the calls back that we can. Some issues, we receive a lot more calls than others, but we're here to listen to every single issue. And it's not just necessarily bills. It's what everyone focuses on during session. Don't forget, we're here to help with any issues you might have with state agencies or anything like that we might be able to step in and just help guide you through the process.
Well, perfect. Well, Representative Dyson, we really appreciate you coming on the Think Brazos podcast. We hope that this will come through with all the technical issues. And just really appreciate you coming on and your service to our community and to the state. So thank you very much for coming on.
Well, Charles, I appreciate everything y'all do too for meeting you and Whitney. I mean, y'all been out there. It was great to see y'all in Austin when y'all came up here, with Habitat. That was a real enjoyable experience to go out there and do that. So look forward to doing some more of those with y'all in the future.
Well, thank you so much. Well, this has been the Think Brazos podcast with Representative Paul Dyson, House District 14, and we are signing off. Thank you.
Thank you.